Hello, everyone. My name is Bryce Lees, and I'm an academic based at Royal Holloway, University of London, in the Department of Drama, Theatre and Dance. And today I have my colleague, Katie Mitchell, who's Professor of Directing and leads our MA in Theatre Directing, as her production of Orlando for the Berlin Schaubühne is screening this evening at 6:30 p.m. Central European Time as part of the Theatre Times International Online Theatre Festival. So I'm just going to talk a little bit with Katie about this production now. Katie, you've adapted Virginia Woolf's novels before, famously with your production of The Waves at the National Theatre in London. What made you wish to come back to Woolf to stage Orlando?
I think the thing that was really exciting about doing Orlando was that when I was in my 20s and first went across into Europe and into Germany, in 1988, 89, the first show I ever saw in Germany at the Schaubühne Theatre was Richard Wilson's adaptation of Orlando with Ute Lampe. I didn't understand at all what was going on, but I thought it was an amazing plunging into European theatre practice. And so this last season, when the Schaubühne asked me to direct something, I said, well, what sort of show are you interested in? And they said they want a big title. And I said, well, give me an example of what a big title is. And they went through a few big Greek titles. And then they said, Virginia Woolf's Orlando. And I just couldn't believe it. And I immediately jumped at the chance to do the show because it brought this amazing circle. It completed this circle of having first come out onto mainland Europe. And this was really the first show I ever saw. And here I was 30 years or so later in the Schaubühne with the opportunity myself to direct it. So I think that was the real excitement. And on top of that, when I was at university doing my special paper on Virginia Woolf, obviously I loved The Waves, it was my favourite, but my second favourite was Orlando because it was quirky and impossible, and sort of to see Virginia Woolf happily write science fiction was so thrilling when I was a student. So the opportunity to do that and to apply the live cinema techniques to this very, very tricky novel was just too exciting to miss.
The master's students on your directing program, they frequently ask about your approach to adapting very difficult novels for the stage. So could you talk a little bit about how you approach the novel as a form for the theatre?
Most of the novels that I've adapted for the theatre, I've used the live cinema technique on. And very rarely have I done any of the adaptations on my own, but I have worked alongside different playwrights, and recently alongside the playwright Alice Birch. And in one sense, once the decision of who is going to adapt it and the decision of it being live cinema has been made, I then pull back quite a lot and leave it, in the case of Alice, in Alice's hands to actually do a film script, which then comes into rehearsals. And then we start to sort of make adjustments to the original film script. So I think maybe students assume that I have a very hands-on with the actual adaptation, but actually I'm completely delegate completely to the writer to do the film script and then work alongside the writer trying to realize the film script adapted ideas in the practical rehearsal situation. And sometimes we have to make changes to the script that was written. So it's a bit cheeky to say that there is zero process, but it is zero process. So the writer makes the adaptation and then it goes through the sort of filter of the rehearsal process, and some bits of it are modified and changed and cut through that process.
Yes, and you mentioned working on live cinema in this production, which is an approach you've become well known for. And something that you've worked on before, of course, at the Schaubühne, for example, in your work on Fräulein Julie, which toured all around the world. And I know in Orlando, you're covering about 400 years of history. So could you talk a little bit about the way in which you interrogated or represented history or different historical periods using live cinema as a technique?
Yes, I think without live cinema, it's probably pretty impossible to do Orlando. So, what live cinema offers, the adaptation of Orlando, is the ability to gallop through 7 historical periods at speed. So, using doubles and very, very complicated on stage costume changes, because you see all of the costume changes over the 7 historical periods live. I think there are over 90 costume changes going on. And using very cunning film technique, we can actually jump cut from one historical to the period to the next in a millisecond, just like the novel does. Whereas I think if we were doing it normally, theatrically normally, then we wouldn't be able to be as bold with all the historical periods. So I think the reason we really wanted to use the live cinema technique to do Orlando was because we knew we could move like lightning through the historical periods in a really formally radical and exciting way to match the thrill of reading the novel.
And you're also, of course, very well known for your gender critiques. And I wondered, did Orlando invite you to think about feminist, trans perspectives or gender in a different way?
Yes, I suppose my feminism is in its early stages second wave feminism, because I was brought up in the 1970s, and now we're in fourth wave feminism, and we're also in a very exciting period where issues of the trans community and gender fluidity are very much at the forefront of my mind as a second wave practitioner, to learn about and invite in this whole new way of framing and thinking about gender. So for me, the project of doing Orlando allowed me to dip my toe in the water of issues of gender fluidity and learn, I think, a lot about them, because of course the novel is like such an important piece of writing when it comes to gender fluidity. It has sentences in it which are breathtaking when you imagine they're written in 1927. It says things like, I'm going to paraphrase obviously because I can't do Virginia Woolf quote verbatim, but it says things like, we all wear male or female clothing, but underneath no one is absolutely male or female. Everyone is gender fluid. That's such a radical, a beautiful idea for 1927. So of course, for me, as a second wave feminist, it offered me an opportunity to have a very exciting conversation with a very different identity group who frame and look out at feminism in a very different way. And I think that was really thrilling and exciting for me and also my team.
Well, of course, many audiences in London were disappointed not to be able to see Orlando at the Barbican. It was supposed to be staged in early April, but because of the lockdown was cancelled. I was wondering how you're coping with the lockdown right now.
The lockdown is very challenging in many ways, I think, and also full of opportunities. So living with a teenager who isn't allowed to see any of her friends is really, really hard. And obviously we all struggle, me and my partner and my lovely daughter, we struggle with her frustrations, understandable frustrations. So that's like the sort of negative side of it. But I think the positive side is it allows a lot more time to reflect on what you do, who you are, and also allows reflection on whole sections of the community now who we completely rely on. So the bus drivers, the health workers, the people who work in shops, who are the poorest section of our community, now we completely are doing all of the heavy lifting. And there's something remarkable politically about that way of the government and the people with power having to reframe and how they look at the world and create almost a new welfare state. Overnight, a new welfare state was created by the Tories. How can that possibly be? So I think the advantages are it really helps us look at society differently. It gives time for personal reflection. It's very challenging for your intimate relationships. I'm enjoying, actually, to be honest, not having to travel a lot and run around the world working like a dog, and have an opportunity to write some books, which I've really, really wanted to do, and do a bit more gardening. And I'm making a special quilt with a patch per day. You can actually, I'm going to show you my quilt. Here it is, the beginning of my quilt. There it goes, there's my quilt. It's a quarantine quilt. So I'm doing some sewing.
Is that Frida Kahlo that I saw?
Yeah, we have a little bit of Frida Kahlo material in the house. So there's a few little bits of Frida Kahlo in the quilt. So there we are, the quarantine quilt.
Are you also thinking about different ways of, for example, working online? So rehearsal processes?
Well, interestingly, I was already preparing an online performance, which was going to happen in autumn 2021, which was reducing carbon use. And so I'm working with the choreographer Jerome Bell, who's a French choreographer. And we had agreed to, with this theatre, the Vidi Theatre in Lausanne, to do a production where we rehearse it entirely on Skype. It's a touring production. And then when it moves from one city to the next, no people move. We then recast people, local people in the next city. So we were already modeling up this idea of a reduced carbon footprint show. So the idea of the pandemic locking us all away and meaning that we can't get into a sort of, live space like a theatre for a bit, I think is quite exciting. I think there are lots of opportunities actually for different types of work that can be made. Maybe work that could start as an online thing and then resolve as a live performance when we come down out of lockdown. So for me, I don't have any problem with online. I think it's quite exciting, really. And I think it is possible to do live performance and to come up with new ways of imagining theatre making.
Thank you so much, Katie. And to all of you spectators out there online, please do make sure to watch Orlando this evening. It's only available until midnight Central European time. Bye-bye.
Bye.